Hi, as you can see by my diagram right here, we're going to be talking about the nervous system today for physiology. And so there's two different aspects of, well, I shouldn't say aspects, I should say branches of the nervous system here we're going to be talking about. We have the somatic and then the sympathetic, or not the somatic and the autonomic nervous system, which is broken up into the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems here. We're going to start off with somatic, all right? So sympathetic, you have your nerve, right? Or neuron, I should say, because it's a singular individual. And this neuron will have a long myelinated strand that will go to that muscle fiber of choice and then just innervate it there, straight up. There's no fuss, there is no muss. It is just straight to the point and just innervates, right? That's all my muscle fibers being contracted by a series of these somatic neurons. Now, I have voluntary control over this because these go straight to the skeletal muscle. These guys, they're in charge of smooth and cardiac muscle, right? And so my autonomic or automatic, if you need help remembering, is in charge of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. We'll start off with sympathetic here, right? So the sympathetics, the heart, I should say, of the sympathetic neurons can be found between thoracic 1 and lumbar 2 vertebrae. This is your sympathetic region right here, and where all the preganglionic neurons will leave the lateral horn of these vertebrae right here. I have a bundle of colors here, and I'll walk us through it here. And so there's 4 different ways this can go. I can have my sympathetic neuron leaving the lateral horn. It goes through, goes down, enters something called the sympathetic chain ganglia. So the sympathetic chain ganglia is pretty much a region where a bunch of neurons congregate and synapse. That's essentially it, and it's by, you guessed it, the spine. And it can either leave and go up back to this ridge right here and act as a spinal neuron, which innervates the skin and sweat glands. It can go through this spinal, for another one, it can go through the spinal chain ganglia and just leave and go somewhere else. That's just your regular sympathetic neuron, right? This could, for example, go to the heart. It's high up, it's near the spine, and it will innervate it to be more, active, right? Because sympathetic system is known as the fight or flight, right? Or fright, flee, or fight. And that's exactly what it does. It'll get your heart rate up. Like, for example, if you're running from a bear or you see a cute girl, your heart rate's going to go up because you're going to be freaking out. However, there is another chain ganglia that I'll go over here quickly. It'll also leave from a lateral horn in this example. It'll run through the spinal chain ganglia, and then it'll get to the collateral chain ganglia. And this collateral chain ganglia pretty much hits all the organs that are south of the diaphragm, right? So maybe your sympathetic nervous system, sympathetic neuron wants to turn off or deactivate the liver, which is understandable. If you're running from a bear, you're not really concerned about your blood toxicity at the moment. And so it can do that. And then for the last one, these are called splanchnic nerves. If you have a test coming up, you'll need to know that. And if your name's Nick, that'll be easy to remember. And then finally, you have from the lateral horn a neuron running through both spinal chain ganglia and the collateral chain ganglia, but synapse is at neither, and it'll run to the adrenal medulla on the kidney. Now, what's the kidney or the gland on the kidney famous for? Adrenaline. That adrenaline will pump up epinephrine and norepinephrine in your body's system. And this will pretty much amp up your sympathetic response to an 11, which is why, the adrenal gland is so famous in our society, right? Because it plays a really big deal in those scary situations. And before I jump over to cover the para, which is a bit simpler, it's important to know there's a few patterns when it comes to neurotransmitters here. All the neurotransmitters is acetylcholine if it's in the synaptic cleft. If it's in between the presynaptic and postsynaptic cleft, it's going to be acetylcholine every time. For the purpose of this conversation, that is a constant mandated in stone. However, the neurotransmitter that's exuded at the end of the long road, that can be different, right? So usually, let's say this is running to the heart, right? So for the synaptic cleft, what did I just say that will be used as a neurotransmitter? Which chemical? Acetylcholine. The acetylcholine transfers that signal, which is received by a nicotine. The receptors for the synaptic clefts is almost always nicotine. If it's an in-betweener, it's a nicotiner. That's how I remember it. It'll activate the postsynaptic neuron, and it'll run to the heart, and it will release either epinephrine or no epinephrine. That part doesn't really matter, but it's not acetylcholine. Unless it's going to the sweat glands. I'm sorry, I didn't make the rules. So if it's a spinal neuron, like I mentioned before, it runs through the skin and sweat glands, this could release acetylcholine if it's going to sweat. I don't know why it's like that. If I could explain it, I would. But however, for the time being, I can't. So we're just going to run with it and just take it on good faith. If it's going to an organ, it's going to be no epinephrine. If it's going to the sweat glands, it's going to be acetylcholine. Here's a good question. You only have one neuron running all the way to the adrenal medulla to activate it. What is that going to release? If you said acetylcholine, you're exactly correct. Because remember, the presynaptic cleft will always release acetylcholine as its neurotransmitter. And so I'll be returning to this idea of transmitters and receptors and all of this later. But for the time being, just take it in good faith that most of the time it's going to be releasing no epinephrine at the end of the road for sympathetic most of the time. Let's talk about parasympathetic. Parasympathetic belongs here. You have like your few vertebrae right here, and you have your vagus nerve, which does like 80% of the parasympathetic work. Yeah, if that guy's cut, you're cooked. Parasympathetic involves the cranial and sacral regions of the spine. And the way it works is more like this. So you have the body of the neuron. It'll have a really long, windy road, all myelinated, right? It'll get to the organ in question. Let's call it pancreas or, I don't know, the liver. Because I really love Liverpool, favorite soccer team. And then the effector neuron will just be right nearby to do its job of influencing the organ in question. And so, okay, what are the neurotransmitters here? Remember, what's the neurotransmitter always used in the in-betweeners? Not nicotine, that's the receptor. Acetylcholine. Nicotine is the receptor for these postsynaptic clefts, for both sympathetic and parasympathetic. And so you have acetylcholine going here. Okay, what about it going from the postsynaptic neuron to the organ? What's like happening there? It's releasing acetylcholine. Isn't that nice? It's so easy to remember. That's a great design decision, my God, in my opinion. That makes it so easy. And that's roughly, that's it, I believe. Let me just double check for that section. Yeah, there's 2 neurons in both pathways for both sympathetic and parasympathetic. And okay, let's talk about receptors now. Yeah, sorry. Drawing is just so much fun. It's so sad when I have to let it go and erase it. So you're going to have different kinds of receptors here. Your sympathetic is going to have these alphas receptors, betas, one, and there's others, but for the point of this conversation, this is all we really need to know. There's a few things we should memorize for this that I'll go over in a sec, but I want to write out parasympathetic first. Okay, perfect. Now we're here. So, for the sympathetic part, there's certain receptors that are found on certain organs, right? So you're going to see alpha 1, that's going to be your blood vessels and eyes. Your beta 1 is your heart. It's like you hear about beta 1 blockers, right? It's probably going to do something relative to the heart. Your beta 2 is your lungs. And so your organs, they have these receptors, and a good rule of thumb to know of how the sympathetic system is going to react to it is that if it's even, it's going to cause it to relax. If it's odd, it's going to cause it to activate. Now, this isn't a perfect rule, but it is a useful rule. I can't give you perfect rules in anatomy, right? There's no perfect bodies either. So let's look at, just for an example, alpha 1. Is alpha 1 odd or even? I hope you said odd because you'd be correct. So what does the sympathetic system do probably in regards to blood? Well, it probably acts upon it and makes it constrict in some way. And so using that reasoning, the sympathetic system probably constricts blood vessels. And you'd be exactly correct. The sympathetic response is to constrict blood vessels to increase blood flow into your muscles and into your any other part that could really help you survive in an immediate situation. So kidney's probably not going to get the blood in the situation. Let's look at the heart. Remember, sympathetic system, fight or flight. You see a bear or a girl, you're scared. B is for bear. There you go, B is for bear. So beta 1, sympathetics now triggering it, and it's like, hey, I'm scared. What's it going to do to the heart rate? Activate it, constrict it, increase it. That's what it's going to do. Again, nothing's perfect in this world. We have beta 2, lungs. Okay, well, going back to the bear example, according to what I've been saying, it should constrict and shrink the lungs. It's actually the opposite. It expands the lungs and makes it easier to breathe. And even though it's a 2, this actually enhances, which is an even number, it actually enhances the function of the lungs. Why does it work that way? I don't know. But that's the truth of it. And it makes sense, right? You'll want more air if you're running from a bear. And yeah, exactly. Parasympathetic system is a little easier to get your head around and to think about. So again, if it's even, it's a deactivator. If it's an odd, it's an activator. The M, by the way, stands for muscarinic. And they react to acetylcholine. I'm trying to think of a specific thing I need to say here. Let's see. Do you think the parasympathetic receptors on your heart is even or odd? Agree. If you said even, I'm inclined to agree, right? Because parasympathetic is your rest and digest. It's the opposite of sympathetic. And if you're eating, you're calm, you're about to take a nap, and it feels great, your heart rate's not up. The even numbers is going to deactivate it, and it's going to be great. Unless you have a test, then your heart rate's probably going to go up. In which case, that's what your B1's going to start doing, and your sympathetic system's going to start going, and then you're going to start getting sweating. All right, I'm starting to goof off here. Let's bring it back here. And so, what are the neurotransmitters for both of these then, right? Because we know acetylcholine is used for the synaptic clefts in between the two neurons as they travel. But for sympathetic, you're going to find, outside of sweat glands and the adrenal medulla, it's going to be epinephrine and no epinephrine, right? Now, some of these react better relative to others, right? For example, for alpha-1, which is for your blood and eyes, if you want to activate the sympathetic system, you're going to want no epinephrine, which will be better. But it's different for each one of these. Let's see if I can remember. I believe no epinephrine is also better for this one. Epi is about the same. Epi is more effective. And then it's back to no epinephrine, which is more effective. Right. I think I'm correct here. I am. So then for parasympathetic, it's chill and it's awesome. And because of that, it's acetylcholine. That's all it wants. And that'll activate it to do whatever function it serves. All right. And so let's double check. Am I missing? I don't believe I missed anything here. All right. Now it's time to talk about how to categorize these receptors. And so all these receptors actually go to what is called, I almost slipped my tongue there. Sympathetic system tends to use, and I say tend to, and I'll return to why, adrenic receptors. Versus parasympathetic, which is cholinergic receptors. Adrenic is any receptor that recognizes epinephrine, or the bad boys of epinephrines, no epinephrines, because they take no for an answer. Sorry, I thought that was clever. Okay, but I'll just write no in parentheses here. Cholinergic, I can't say that word, is stuff that uses acetylcholine. So you can see cholinergic receptors at, say, the synaptic clefts, because think about it, acetylcholine is used there all the time. And it's also used dominantly in the parasympathetic system, because that's how muscarinic receptors function, right? They recognize acetylcholine. Let's go to sympathetic. Sympathetic systems, like, look at this stuff. This recognizes no epinephrine better, or no epinephrine, all this stuff. Those are just variations of adrenic receptors. And so, pretty simple concept. That's just a little bit of memorization that'll have to happen. And then, I believe that'll be it. Okay. So, as we go through it, different subdivisions of each type. Yeah, no, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching, and if there's anything I can do to help you guys, let me know. I'd love to help. But yeah, that's it. Like, some of this stuff reacts better to certain no epinephrines and epinephrines and stuff like that, but they react to both. Yeah. Great day.